Great. So we'll give it one minute here and let folks trickle in. Right. Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. So yeah, we wanted to thank everyone here for joining us today for this EPSP Connects virtual panel. We have some great folks lined up here to chat about jobs outside academia. So it's myself, the main moderator here, Jimmy Geilinger, and then Scott Feehan too, who's going to help be co-moderating. Scott, if you wanted to go through and kind of explain how today was going to go, that'd be great.
Yeah, so like Jimmy said, thank you all for joining. My name is Scott Feehan. I'm a fourth-year PhD student at the University of Nevada. So EPSP Connects is a monthly seminar series. It flip-flops between science talks and community-based discussions. Today we're going to do a community-based discussion. The chat is open at the end of our initial questions here, so feel free to throw questions in there once we wrap up. But yeah, we look forward to our discussion today.
Cool, yeah, and so today's panel is focused on a discussion centered around jobs outside academia. And part of the motivation for doing a panel like this today is because in a lot of cases, especially in graduate programs, a lot of universities are kind of geared towards preparing students more for academic or tenure track professorship jobs. So we wanted to have a venue here to be able to kind of promote thinking about jobs outside of that traditional academic route. So we're very excited here to have our panelists, Robert Emberson, Keely Pretzlav, Laura Zinke, and Sean Chartrand. They have a lot of experience and I'm sure a lot of great insights to share today. So what we were going to start out with here is basically just go through, I was going to have each of the panelists go through and basically do a brief intro about themselves and kind of their academic journey, and then transition into their positions outside academia. So I guess we can start out with you, Robert.
Thanks, Jimmy. So hi everyone, my name is Robert Anderson. I am currently working at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center as part of the Applied Science Land Slides program. My story, I did a PhD at the GFZ in Potsdam, looking at kind of geochemistry and geomorphology. I then went to work briefly at Nature Geoscience as a local year, but still within that sphere, and then worked after that for about a year as a freelance science writer and editor as well. And then I moved back a little bit, kind of in the sort of weird space between academia and kind of like applied science and impact, and sort of work with landslides at NASA, where I have a lot of work with groups like the World Bank and the UN agencies to kind of do sort of more development and kind of humanitarian work with respect to natural disasters. So excited to be here, and yeah, pass it on.
And Keely, did you want to go next?
And the unmute button. Okay, yeah, I'm Keely Pretzlav. I did my bachelor's East Berkeley in math, and did a couple of years working actually at a consulting company in kind of tech in the Bay Area. It was like we did like predictive analytics for consumer packaged goods companies, actually. So it's a consulting model. And I liked some aspects of the work, but I didn't like the application of it necessarily. I wasn't super excited about making, yogurt companies more money. So I wanted to go back to graduate school. I applied as a master's student at a bunch of universities. I didn't even really know, I didn't have a background in geology at all. Didn't even really know what geomorphology was. I kept applying to hydrology professors, even though that's not what I wanted to do. Fortunately, I got in at UT Austin. Someone actually answered my emails. Super lucky there. So I started a master's program looking at sediment transport and unsteady rivers and armor development with Joel Johnson there. And also really fortunate, UT Austin has a pretty good funding situation. So I was actually able to convert my master's to a PhD after the first year. So I did a little bit of thinking and asking around in my network and decided that for the career track that I wanted, doing science in environmental consulting, that a PhD was a better route for me. Also, given my kind of shift in disciplines, I thought that the extra expertise would be really good. I thought like 2 years of a master's just wouldn't get me the background that I needed, given I didn't have a geology degree. Then my last summer in my PhD, it was really fortunate to meet some great folks at Gilbert Club who work for Balanced Hydrologics. And I was able to get an internship in my last summer of my PhD. And then finished up my PhD and was offered a full-time job. The internship was really valuable for a lot of reasons, kind of mutual trying things out, right? I got to check out what Balance is about. Balance got to check me out as a scientist. And I've been working there ever since.
Now on my screen, it looks like, yeah, Laura, if you want to go next.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm Laura Zinke. I think a bit like Keely, I didn't really have a geoscience background for my undergraduate degree. I don't know. I just liked being outside. I got a biology degree with a geography minor for what that was worth for undergraduate. And then I knew I still wanted to do environmental science, and I really liked biogeochemistry in general. So yeah, I ended up getting into a PhD program at the University of Southern California. I think the degree title is technically marine biology and biological oceanography, but I don't know. I'm handling papers on coral reefs occasionally, and I'm just like, I did not learn marine biology, did I? So kind of an interdisciplinary background. And I was always hanging out in the earth science department. I confused a lot of people. They thought that I was in their department, my lab was in their department. And sometimes I let that assumption just carry on for a while. Yeah, and then, so I was working mostly in sediments and like marine sediment biogeochemistry, deep biosphere sort of stuff. And I thought, I don't really know exactly what I want to do for a job going forward. I really liked science. I really liked, I'm not going to say I enjoyed my qualifying exams, but I really enjoyed studying for them. I was just like, oh, this is great. I have an excuse to be out of the lab and reading papers 10 hours a day, and my advisor can't be mad because I have to do this anyways. So I loved that, and I loved editing all my colleagues' papers and things like that. And then I found out that editorial was actually a full-time career path. I thought it was all, like academic editors or external board members, and would just be, you have to be a professor, and then part-time you can be an editor. But yeah, when I found out you could full-time be an editor, I think I started applying to editorial positions when I still had 2 years of my PhD left, which was a bit ridiculous, but why not, right? Yeah, and then I thought I really wanted to get some more experience in broader fields. The field I was in was a bit niche, so I did a postdoc at University of California, Davis in the Department of Plant Pathology of all places. So me and my advisor, who was very much more on the biogeochem side, were sort of weirdos there. But yeah, I was working in soils and something more applied and agricultural, which I also really liked. And at one point, my advisor sat me and another postdoc down and was like, I don't know what y'all's thing is really. And if you want to be a professor, you need a thing. And people in academia can debate over how true that is or not. But I think that really pushed me towards yeah, you know what? I would rather get to dabble in everything and read everything and give people advice than actually dedicate my life to finding out. In her case, she's like, I want to know everything there is to know about soil viruses. And I was like, I don't feel that way about any one thing. I just kind of like it all. Yeah, so I just kept applying to editorial jobs and got one at Nature Reviews, Earth and Environment, and have been there for over 2 years now. And there I do editorial things. I handle peer review and hands-on edit papers, which some people like and some people are a bit surprised by. And yeah, it's a good time. I used to get to travel, but COVID, but yeah, that was a perk.
Cool, thanks, Laura. Yeah, and then I guess, yeah, Sean, if you wanted to wrap it up.
Yes, good morning, or good close to afternoon for some of you. I'm Sean Chartrand. I'm a faculty member at Simon Fraser University. And I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. I'm privileged to live and work on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Musqueam, and Coquitlam First Nations. I'd also like to start by saying I've had the good fortune of working with Keely just up until recently, and that was a great adventure, and I look forward to more work with her because I also worked at Balance Hydrologics. I have an undergraduate training in geology and a master's in geology and a PhD, nominally in physical geography, but it really focused on geophysics and fluid mechanics. I have a bit of an untraditional background in the academic realm. After my master's degree, I spent some time with the Peace Corps in Asia, and when I came back, decided it was probably time to try to find a job in my field. Although in the late 90s, that was pretty difficult. Not a lot of folks were hiring river scientists, which at the time was what I was really qualified to work professionally as in the field. So I worked as a carpenter for a while until jobs actually became available. And then all of a sudden, poof, I got some emails from my old advisor at Case Western Reserve, Peter Whiting. And before you knew it, there were jobs all over the Bay Area. People wanted to hire river scientists or fluvial geomorphologists. In 2000, I started working at Balance Hydrologics. And I spent the next, almost 21 years there, just until recently, working as a staff scientist and then working in management and helping to run the company. After my PhD, I had a postdoc at Vanderbilt University. And then I spent 2 years on a limited term contract with Simon Fraser University as a research faculty member, but largely responsible for teaching graduate courses in a master's degree program that's focused on ecological restoration. That was the focus for me because of my professional background working as a fluvial geomorphologist, a river scientist, as Keely can tell us. Our firm, Balance, spent a lot of time in the restoration world, so that's where I gained a lot of my experience, and so I was well suited for that. And then just recently I've transitioned into a tenure track position and sadly had to say goodbye to Balance and Keely formally. So that's a bit about me and my background.
Great, thanks so much to all of you. So I think we'll start out just with our questions here, and I'll go ahead and direct this one to Laura and Robert. And so in terms of preparation for the non-academic job market, what skills do you wish you had spent more energy honing during your education?
That is a really good question. I guess for what I'm doing right now, something that I thought was kind of lacking in, my formal training was more like a technical writing background. I've had writing classes, but they're more focused on proposal writing, and they're like, great, let's take you through and write, an NSF proposal start to finish, which not super useful for me now. So I do kind of wish I'd had a bit more of that formal training. But yeah, I tried to patch that up a bit with doing more like freelance, or like not really freelance, but like, outreach writing and blogging and things like that for one of the Bites blogs for Ocean Bites. And I thought that was really useful, even though it wasn't, a formal part of my education.
I would say something similar. In terms of science writing, I think you can read a lot of great work out there. I pick Ed Yong, who just won the Pulitzer, as a fantastic example of someone who's a great science writer. I kind of kidded myself that I could produce work that was of high quality as soon as I started doing this. Even if you are the best science writer in the world, and I was not by the time when I first began, you need a portfolio behind you before anyone's going to pay you to do this. So specifically, I would say if you want to get into science communication, it's really valuable to produce and to do freelance, to do volunteer writing, communication, while you still have the security of a job and a PhD. Let's put it that way. To do that in your time, and it's not because this won't detract from your PhD, because ultimately it benefits your whole communication strategy and work as a student, but you won't get paid straight away as a freelance writer unless you have something behind you. So I'd really recommend building a portfolio. The other piece of advice I would give that I wish I'd done more of is learn Python. I mean, this is a really stupid thing, but I think frankly I use it every day as a kind of data science. A lot of the data science work I do, and I had to teach myself that when I was kind of unemployed. There are better ways to do that. I think, use it as part of your day-to-day work. Python is just one example, but R and other kind of scripting languages, it's so valuable these days, and I think it's translatable to almost anything. So those are my two.
My advice for figuring out what skills to pick up in grad school. So UT Austin is a pretty, there's actually a lot of industry connection there, but it's mostly oil and gas. So I would go to these career fairs and they would like laugh at me because they're like, environmental, what is that? So I was really we had a huge career center, but it's really on my own in terms of finding an environmental job. Sometimes you could get like hydrology remediation kind of connections, but really nothing like in the restoration field, which is what I was looking for. I would say if you have a type of job in mind, just spend some time looking at their websites, companies' websites, and seeing what it is that they do. Before I started at Balance, I'd never taken a flow measurement, a bed load measurement. I'd done some surveying in a class. The good thing about being in a PhD is that you learn how to learn, right? Like that's the single thing that you pick up. And so fortunately, I was able to convince Balance that I could learn all those things, but I really had to start out pretty junior just because I didn't have the very basics, like nuts and bolts of like the day-to-day work that we do. The other thing that's really, really handy for consulting is getting your hands on one or more kind of out-of-the-box software packages. HECRAS is one for river modeling, hydraulic modeling, HMS for hydrologic modeling. There's like a whole long list. GIS is huge in consulting, just knowing your way around that. So even though they're kind of frowned upon in academic world, learning one of those modeling tools is really key. And then also, if you have some experience with kind of the UI, data in, data out, the processes, how they can be applied, you can really easily pick up pretty much anything else that the company can throw at you. So just having one of those on your resume is really helpful.
I would just like to echo Laura and Robert's emphasis on writing. Writing is extremely important. It's how we communicate with people. We work in technical fields, and oftentimes in the professional world, we're communicating with non-technical people or people that don't have a science background. And to help them understand your work and the implications of your work, what's really needed is clear, succinct writing. So, spending that time trying to hone your writing skills will do you great service throughout your career if you step away from research and academia. It'll help there, obviously, too. But it is slightly different flavors of writing, right? Like, let's not kid ourselves that it's not that when you write a professional report, you write it differently than you would a research article. And then the second thing I would add to all the other great thoughts that have already been provided is in the geosciences, at least, or earth science, we often interface with engineers. So perhaps taking 1 or 2 engineering courses during your undergraduate or your graduate training will really help you, largely not so that you can necessarily take that material in and practice it, but so that you can learn how other people think about problems that you yourself will be working on alongside with them and collaborating with them on trying to find solutions for.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's all excellent advice too, especially emphasizing the kind of different aspects of SciComm and how important it is. So the next question I was going to direct towards Keely and Sean was, were there any trainings or certifications such as, PE, PG credentials outside of your academic preparation that were useful in positions you've had? And were there any professional societies that you would recommend that helped you navigate this or helped you with connections and those sorts of things?
Okay, you want me to go?
Yeah. Go.
So I am licensed as a professional geologist in California, and I'm also certified as an engineering geologist. I think the key with these types of things is that they differ state by state. On the West Coast, where seismic risk is an ever-present danger, oftentimes these licenses and certifications are built directly into legal code, for example, building code. And so the acquiring of the license and the practicing as a professional under a license or a certification is really a reflection of how, let's just say, California wishes certain things to be done so that they have confidence that that everyone's doing it the same way, because a whole bunch of experts have come together and said this is the best way to approach this problem, and so that there's a standard of care that's practiced and it doesn't have to be questioned. That's not necessarily the case in other states. However, with that said, the licensing itself is fairly straightforward. For the geology license, in California, you take 3 exams. In most other states, you take 2 exams. California throws in a state-specific exam, mainly because the geology in California is so diverse and because of the seismic risk. They want to make sure that people have a basic foundation in that. Beyond that, the certification is like allows you additional legal rights or affords you the ability to walk on, say, construction sites and accept things like cut fill slopes or inspect foundations and things of this nature. Those are very helpful in the professional world. Certifications and licenses demonstrate that you have you have a body of knowledge that's consistent with what experts would suggest is needed to practice professionally. But it does differ across the United States, for example. And in Canada, it's completely different. There is no legal aspect to anything, and there are no exams that are required. It's an experience-based thing. So in terms of organizations, I personally don't know of any organization that's really necessary to help people prepare for the exams, other than perhaps just knowing that the exams exist and that you can get this thing called a professional geoscience license. That's administered by, I think, ASBOG. But so just, being aware of it is probably critical. I'm sure that Geological Society of America has some support for it at their meetings. I personally did not avail myself of those because the mentors I had let me know that, in a few years, this is what you're going to do because it'll be good for your career and this is how you prepare for it and so forth.
Yeah, so I don't have any professional certifications. Interestingly, even though I have a PhD in geology, I am not eligible, nor will I ever be eligible to get a PG license. And it's because my bachelor's is not in geology, because I didn't ever take, there's like a very specific list of coursework that's required for that license, including mineralogy, structural geology classes that I never took in graduate school. I am, however, potentially eligible to get a professional engineer license, because those prerequisites are just experience-based. And actually, I thought for a while, my background as a bachelor's in math is a fairly quantitative, and a balance a lot for in a lot of consulting companies. If you did want to go in the quantitative route, you probably would go more in the civil engineering side of consulting companies. And so I thought about getting a PE. We have licensed PEs that I work under that would write me the necessary letters. And I will say that getting a professional license at a consulting company can add to it can help you advance and within the company. Usually there's a pay raise associated with that, sometimes a promotion, sometimes promotions are tied to license. You don't have to have as much of your work overseen by managers, and so you can get promoted. Where was I going with this? So in some ways it's really good to get, and that's kind of why I was thinking PE. At Balance, getting a PE would for us means stamping restoration design plans, modeling papers, and that wasn't where I'm headed in my career trajectory anymore. I was thinking that, not so much anymore. So I actually decided that I'm probably not going to get a professional license. The new thing that a lot of people are interested in is this data science kind of piece in consulting. And that's kind of where I'm headed with my career. And there's not really a professional license for that yet. Maybe there will be eventually. I would get that if that existed. So I think, again, it's just kind of depends on what kinds of things you want to do. I think with we have several PGs on staff. Sean used to be one of them. There are very few things that we produce at Balance that require a PG stamp. If you're going to do anything related to slope stability, seismic, anything like Sean was talking about, you would need it. Groundwater geology is another that really, really requires a PG or a what's the hydrogeologist license. If you're going to do anything, seismic, you need it. So yeah, it just kind of depends on what you need. And the other license that you could get is that some folks on this call might be interested in is a PLS, a professional licensed surveyor. So that's another track to go also.
Based on, given where you took things, Keely, I think it's important to also mention that if people want to apply their training as an expert witness for legal proceedings, in some states a license is required for a judge to admit your either your direct testimony or your interview deposition of material. So it's good to look into that if that's the route you want to go. Expert witness work usually is quite lucrative because the stakes are high, obviously. If you quote unquote screw up, it could have large implications for the organization or people that you work with. So that's another aspect of having a license. But yeah.
Well, great. Thank both of you. That was very interesting to see the different paths and decisions you make on achieving these types of things that help your career advance. And so I guess we'll kind of tie on with that with the next question. And I'll again put this to Robert and Laura, but I think everyone could probably give some insight on this question, which would be, what advice do you give to mentors for helping their mentees who are interested in pursuing these jobs outside of academia?
I guess, so I'll maybe pitch in here first. So the space I work in right now is a lot of kind of applied science projects, working with stakeholders and particularly development work and disaster response work. All of that is working with outside groups. And this is, there's a whole list of different potential opportunities with NGOs or kind of government or kind of more local sort of groups and partners. But as a mentor, I think opening the door and building connections for your mentees with those groups to kind of network effectively and give them the opportunity to work outside of just writing papers and lab work is a huge step up, in my mind at least. I think I'm really lucky to have a good mentor as well right now who really opens a lot of doors for me to meet with and work alongside these great groups. And I think ultimately that space of applied science is one that we all kind of sit within that umbrella at some level. And and it's how much you want to be exposed to the groups who are not specifically in academia. And I think if you have early exposure to that, you're going to really benefit later on. And I think that's one of the things that as a mentor you can do most effectively. That and effectively teach how to write, as we said before, but I just want to go back on that again.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. I think some things that were really valuable that my mentors did was, in a way, like doing nothing sometimes and just giving me the space to, do some extra outreach activities and do extra writing. And, I'd say usually after the fact, oh yeah, well, I signed up to do, X, Y, or Z. And, I never got told that is, absolutely unacceptable. You need to not do that and focus on your research. So yeah, I think giving students a little bit of leeway, or your mentees a little bit of leeway, and letting them, if they find opportunities, even if you think it's kind of stupid, let them spread their wings a bit. That sounds really cheesy, but yeah. And I think the other thing that I found really helpful is kind of knowing where people went, even people who were maybe a couple of cohorts ahead of me and who I wasn't close with, but say, oh, did you know, actually, like I knew someone who kind of knew someone who then became an editor at Nature Communications. And I didn't know from her that she had done that, but my advisors would be like, oh yeah, did you hear so-and-so has this job? And then I could reach out to her and say, oh, what do you think of this? And yeah, just being willing to make those connections and say, oh, I had a student 10 years ago who's now working as a consultant or whatever. If that's something you're interested in, I'll put you in touch and make that, so you kind of bridge that for them, like Rob was saying.
I just want to just want to sort of add one more point to that as well, and that all of these opportunities sort of outside of the traditional academic work do have direct benefits to what you're doing in your own lab if you're a mentor. I mean, you can do a project, let's say with the World Bank, and you can get a paper out of that, and it's definitely valuable work for your academic career as well. But you've also done something valuable for a community that's maybe at risk, and I think there's prestige that goes with that as much as anything else. But even if you're just looking at just purely your academic work, having a student that can that can write more effectively and has better connections and then can go on and do more interesting things, I think that benefits you directly as well. So there's not just, you're not just doing it purely selflessly. There is a definite benefit for a mentor to make these opportunities available as well.
I think I'll add in a few thoughts in terms of specifically focused at consulting and perhaps nonprofits. It's good for mentors to encourage their mentees to attend professional meetings, not necessarily research-based, and encourage them to give presentations, either posters or oral or otherwise, as a way to introduce themselves to the people who attend the meetings, and possibly as someone who may hire you into a job. You won't make that connection unless you attend some type of regional conference, say that's focused on extreme precipitation is a popular one in California, or Society for Ecological Restoration, American Fisheries Society. The regional conferences tend to be more practitioner based, and it gives you a good venue to meet professionals working in similar fields and provide you an opportunity to build connections and perhaps find yourself an opportunity for work. Another useful way to get to know the communities that you work in is to visit organizations and offer to give something like a brown bag lunch, is what we called it at Balance, where we invite people in and they basically spend an hour and they tell us about our work. And sometimes Balance use that as an opportunity to get to know someone that they were interested in, but just didn't know if it was going to be a good fit. Sometimes that it's really helpful for the mentor to open those doors and to make those connections. Other times you yourself can make the connections and reach out directly. Introduce yourself, say what you work on, what your interests are, and that you'd like to share your work over a lunchtime talk if they have something like that, and get to know people in the organization.
Go ahead.
So this isn't actually insight from me, but kind of a question coming from, I consider myself, I guess, in an academic adjacent field. So a lot of the things like LinkedIn, for instance, don't really apply to, my job market. But I was wondering if encouraging your mentees to get like a LinkedIn account or one of these other sort of online professional things would be helpful for, say, consulting, if maybe Keely or Sean had any thoughts on that, or if it's, just another social media profile to try to keep updated.
I think an internet presence is really helpful. Like I should be able to Google your name if you send me an email and like pull up something like a LinkedIn profile. If you had a website, that's fine too. But I think something with a little, like I want to, if I get a resume, I want to be able to Google them and like figure out who your advisor is. Like, because in a lot of ways that helps me. If I know who your advisor is from my academic time, I can kind of narrow in a little bit more than what I can read on a resume of like what sorts of skills you may have. Or just put your advisor in your, I don't know. So some people go both ways. I've gotten so many resumes without advisor names on them. It's maybe there's reasons, I don't know. Yeah, so some internet presence is really helpful, just so that there's a little bit more information about you and your research out there other than that's on 1 or 2 page resume.
Yeah, I'd add if you're not someone who's big into social media, just having a bare bones website where you spend a little time just telling the audience, your audience, who you are and what your interests are, that would be extremely helpful in the case that you don't have a LinkedIn profile or you're not active on Twitter or whatever, these other social media outlets. That's super helpful. And going with Keely's suggestion, that would give a direct hit when a web search is done on your name, that it would take you there and give you the portal that you have more control over in your comfort zone, etc.
Awesome. Yeah, no, this is all fantastic advice too. And having some sort of an internet presence being important, and also the kind of the multi-mentor approach too. If you're an advisor, kind of making sure to have that network available and having students reach out. That's great.
I had a quick follow-up to the previous question that just popped in my head. It's also useful to volunteer in community organizations. The students that I'm fortunate to work with in the ecological program at Simon Fraser, a lot of them volunteer with organizations. And I'd say, there's probably a 50% rate that they are asked to either have an internship or possibility of a short-term job or a long-term job if the volunteer experience goes well in both directions. It's also obviously very good to give back and spend time in an unselfish way, but that's a very useful way to meet community members and also build connections.
Also, a decent number of people in professional organizations similarly volunteer for those sorts of things. So that may be another way to make connections too.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, this is great. So this was kind of the last specific question that we had that we'd written down as moderators, but was going to direct this initially at Sean and Keely, but everyone can feel free to answer. So what should we expect during the hiring process in non-academic jobs? What does starting pay and benefits look like for different education levels? So that's kind of the first part of the question. And then kind of what does the negotiation process look like? And then the last little bit too, in particular, what advice would you give to members of underrepresented groups throughout the hiring and negotiation process?
So hiring, I'm sure it varies a lot by company. And so unfortunately, I can only speak to my experience at Balance. Generally you would submit a resume. Please include at least a paragraph of what you're looking for, like, it doesn't have to be a formal cover letter, but something about like what you want to do, your interests. It just saves us that like first phone call, which is really all you talk about anyway. And so that really, really helps. And look at the website of the company before you send that email, please. So, you know, usually there'll be some initial phone call with somebody at the company. Then there might be an interview. We do these interviews with, like, unfortunately, multiple people. They're trying to save time, but I think they probably come across as a little intimidating. Which is like a very different style than the like all day, like one-on-one tech style interviews. So maybe it's better. I'm not really sure, but that's how we do it. Often there's a brown bag lunch. If you have some academic or other science projects that you can present, it's kind of a good way to introduce you to the rest of the company. And yeah, it's good for us to see how you present. It's kind of a part of the interview for sure. Let's see. What else? What were the other? I forgot. There was a lot of parts to that question.
Yeah, and like advice for like underrepresented groups during that process.
Yeah, I think you know, when we get a resume, we don't know your status necessarily. You know, sometimes based on the name, you can tell. I think the biggest hurdle for underrepresented groups at our company is writing and English proficiency. And so if English isn't your first language, a writing sample right off the bat can be really helpful to help us figure that out, because communication is such a big piece. And then I think too, for underrepresented groups, often the big hurdle to get over is like the opportunities that you've had leading up to that point, right? And may or may not have had. And so again, just giving us what your interests are helps us understand if you have the motivation to learn what you need on the job that you maybe missed along the way. And so we're much more interested in, like, the work that we do on a day-to-day basis isn't difficult. The main thing is that you need to be motivated to learn it. And so if you're missing this or that, it's fine as long as you're like really excited to learn about it. And then the other thing I would say too is that a lot of the medium to small size firms don't post jobs very often because we just get really good resumes pretty frequently through whatever network, or people just email. So even if there isn't a job posted, just email your resume anyway, because we very rarely post jobs and we're always hiring people. So, and maybe, especially, you know, maybe do it a year before you're graduating, because again, these small to medium sized firms, sometimes you can make space, sometimes you see a big project coming in the future, that sort of thing. So just send it out, even if there's no job posting.
I'd like to add on a few additional thoughts there, and perhaps what I can do is try to make the process more transparent, which is what I think is a critical step in trying to help geoscience become more reflective of the diverse peoples that live in many of the communities where we live. The first step is getting your resume and cover letter. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have a clearly written and succinct cover letter that demonstrates your interest in the position. So earlier on, Keely suggested that you do a little research on the organization or the private company that you're interested in working for. That's vitally important to reflect in your cover letter. And these cover letters should not be more than a page long. Ideally, they're 2 to 3 paragraphs at most. You introduce yourself, you say why you're sending the resume along, and then you'd launch directly into why you're interested in the position, and perhaps a little bit of selling of why you are a good candidate to consider for the position. And this is where we start to see a great range of how people approach this. Some people are hard sellers, some people are more soft sellers, but nonetheless, it's important to say why you think you're a good candidate for the position. The key, it's just like science writing. You want a sentence or two to catch someone's attention, right? If you're applying for a job in a bigger company, you may be competing against 25 to 100 people. So people are going to be reading lots of cover letters and resumes. They're going to give you 30 seconds to a minute of their attention. So you need to get their attention quickly. You want to try to invite them into reviewing your resume. Okay, so once you pass that, then typically we would look at the resume. There are so many, compared to when I applied for my first job, resumes have exploded in terms of their diversity in and of themselves, right? There's so many different ways of preparing resumes and disseminating information about yourself. I'd say find one that works well for the field that you're interested in. So again, doing research online of what kind of resumes people have. In this case, maybe through LinkedIn, you can reach out to people and ask them to share their resume with you, or ask your mentor to help you acquire resumes of people that work professionally in the field to see how they are structuring it and what information they're emphasizing, so forth and so on. When you come straight out of school, if you have no experience in working in the professional world, you don't really have experience, right? So your emphasis is going to be your academic training, what degrees you have, the courses you took. That's great. Everyone who is in that boat will approach it the same way. The way you can differentiate yourself is by spending a little time reflecting on the information in your cover letter that you bring into your resume. And in the resume, what you want to try to focus on is what your career interests are as far as you understand them now. So just like writing a research proposal, perhaps you lay it out in a 2 to 5 year term. You know, over this 2 to 5 year term, my interests and goals are X, Y, and Z. I think I can achieve them because I have this training and I've had this field experience or this exposure to programming in Python or whatever it may be. But in your resume as well, you want to capture the reader's attention, just like your cover letter, because again, people are going to be looking at lots and lots of resumes. After that, then usually there's a selection process. Resumes and cover letters are cut down. A pile is made for those that the organization wants to speak to directly. It's good to practice. If you get a call and you're going to have a phone interview, just like any job interview, you want to practice for that. Reach out to your friends or your family members. Ask them to prepare questions. Really what you want to have some experience with is answering questions on the fly, right? You may not know specifically what questions are going to be answered, but you want to be able to communicate, just like in your writing, verbally in a manner so that people understand you. And so it really reflects you as an individual. You gain that by practicing. So if the phone interview goes well, usually then you get invited for an in-person interview. Keeley laid out the process that Balance generally takes, which is interviewing with 3 or 4 people for a couple of hours, and then a brown bag and perhaps a tour of the office, meeting people. The interview process is, again, you want to prepare for that. You want to go through the process of answering questions. So it's good to reach out to colleagues and friends and families, or maybe professionals in the field, ask them what kind of questions they would ask during an interview. The key, though, again, is you want to practice. You have to prepare. You have to treat an interview just like anything else that you want to achieve professionally. It takes practice to gain the experience to do it well. And then during negotiations, my recommendation to anyone negotiating for a job is to ask. If there's something that you want, the worst that can come from it is for them to say no. But if you don't ask, you'll never know. And in at least in our fields that we work in, river science, soil science, slope stability type fields in the geosciences or earth sciences, a starting wage in any major city in the US is probably in the vicinity of $50,000 to $80,000 if you have a master's. If you have a PhD, you can push that upwards to 90 to 100. If you're applying for a very large company where they want to slot you into a research type position, you can probably compete with the major universities in terms of salary and achieve something of 100,000 plus. But after that, right, there are other benefits that you might be interested in. It's good to ask for time to work on research papers. It's good to ask for support to attend conferences and to publish your work, right, because it costs money to publish your work. It's good to ask for time. Nowadays, I think organizations are more open to more vacation out of the gate. 2 weeks is just simply not enough to allow us to rejuvenate and to gain some level of ourselves. You know, ask for more vacation. The key is don't be afraid to ask in a respectful way, and you know, and then you'll see what comes out the other side. But if you don't ask, you'll never know. And I can guarantee that the organization probably isn't going to offer it if you don't ask it, other than their standard sort of package that they offer everyone. So to me, that's the process in the professional world that I'm aware of. And I hope that that provides a little more transparency to the process to whomever's going to watch this.
Yeah, thank both of you.
I can just tag on.
Go ahead, Robin.
Sorry. I was going to tag on briefly to give some thoughts about international opportunities. I know that there may be some people looking at this. I'll say that salaries generally outside of the US tend to be lower. I think I don't have personal experience working in the sort of consulting industry, but generally from working with colleagues who've spoken to me about this, it does tend to be lower in Europe. In terms of opportunities for diversity and communities of minority communities, there are a few places I can recommend within my area, which is kind of disaster science and sort of development work. And I would say the Bill Anderson Fund is a really good example of a group that works with minority communities. The UN offers internships to a large number of people from around the world, and they insist on it being from a diverse range of countries. And the World Bank, I think, is similar too. So there are opportunities to look for some of the bigger organizations that can be found in your own countries as well. Yeah, so yeah, but of course your mileage may vary as well. So yeah.
Right, great. Like I said, thank you all so much. Very, very good discussion, extremely informative, and yeah, I'm sure that will be very much appreciated by everyone that views this. And so I think we'll go ahead and for the last, we only have a couple more minutes here. We do have a question in our Q&A, so if you've got one, please throw it in there. Otherwise, we'll work through this one and then wrap it up here today. And so this is from Lauren Grimley. And so, what do you miss? What do you miss and not miss about academia? Schedule, workload, things of that nature.
Yeah, I guess I can start. This is a conversation we have around the office, working from home a lot, sometimes formally and sometimes informally. Yeah, I think something that's nice that's working for a corporation is it tends to be a little more contracted and structured. And I really like that. Like, I like knowing, okay, I sign on at around this time, I sign off at around this time. I don't have my work email installed on my phone or anything. When I go on leave, I just set an out of office, which is something that varies in academia, I think. I do miss a little bit the freedom you get in academia. I feel like, you know, at least at the point where I went through academia up to, there was a little more, oh, if you want to go spend a week working on X without really having to account for that, that's fine. And then I really miss working with students. I really liked TAing, and that's something I don't do now. I feel like I'm in the grown-up world, so I don't get to see undergrads and interact with them as much.
One point I'll make about, although it was brief, my stint as an editor, I guess, Laura, maybe you have more insight on this. One benefit of being outside of academia is generally your access to a union. Maybe this was just the UK, but you do have access to kind of union representation in other jobs, which is not something you benefit from so much within academia. I know that some grad student groups have been doing this, and I applaud that, but I think that generally it's not so common. So it's worth thinking about that you may have union representation.
I'll say consulting hours are probably kind of similar to academia. It depends on how you manage your work and time in academia. In consulting, there are always deadlines, and so occasionally there are some extra hours put in. This varies hugely by company. Huge variability. One thing that I really, really value about balance is that generally the priority is 40-hour work weeks. And that is not, from my understanding of other companies, that's not really the norm. The one trade-off is, in consulting, the money that a company makes is directly tied to how many hours you bill out in an invoice. And so if your goal is compensation, then working for a company that prioritizes billability means you're going to work more hours, but you'll probably be compensated more. And so there's in a place like the Bay Area, this expensive cost of living, there are trade-offs there with salary expectations and the number of hours that you work. The other thing about the thing that I really like about consulting, and that I didn't love that much about research in academia, is that I love science. I love investigating questions, solving problems, and I didn't love coming up with them myself. I didn't want to sit in a room and think deeply about what's the most interesting question. The thing I love about consulting is that someone comes to me with the question, and then I just get to figure out the answer. I also love that I don't have to spend years answering a question. Consulting, you get the question, you get a budget, you answer the question with the budget you have, and then you move on. There are projects that we spend, multiple years on, but it's advancing, refining questions, et cetera. A lot of things, it's you work on something for a couple months, you send out the report, it's done. And I like that level of detail in exploration and presenting information, answering questions. And that's the thing that I really, really love about consulting. But at a company like Balance, where it's more of a science focus, it's not that different from academia in terms of the skills that you need or the kind of part of your brain that you're using or that sort of thing. So that's my perspective.
So yeah, it looks like we had, and thanks Robert for typing out an answer to this one, but I figured I'd pitch it out to the whole panel. So this is from Ken Lepper. Do you have any thoughts for very senior people who may choose or be forced to leave academia in terms of entering the non-academic workforce?
I'll take a go at it. I think it depends obviously on where your interests lie. If you want to work in the nonprofit sector or in the advocacy sector or in the private sector, your opportunities will probably be vastly different. But I think it's probably fair to say if you're a senior person leaving academia, the landscape is pretty big in terms of opportunities. And a lot of the same ways to make those opportunities come to life that we discussed for perhaps if you're earlier in your career, apply later in your career, giving presentations at non-research organization conferences and so forth will help make those opportunities come to life. But you should be able to slot in quite high at any organization if you're a senior person, and probably be something like a research director or a creative director, where you're using your talents to answer questions to help the organization mold and perhaps explore a new field that they want to engage with. And that really requires someone who can, I think, forecast out and find the critical questions that are necessary to help the organization launch in that direction, and then pursue and build a program around that, sort of like a research program. But I think in short, you would have lots of opportunities. It's the hard part is going to be probably finding the best opportunities to suit your interests, because you have so many directions you can go in. So focusing in will be quite beneficial in terms of understanding what you want to get out of it.
Yeah, I would add that it's odd that to me, but it seems like folks in my field don't really move around companies that often. You find a place that you like, and because there's a lot of aspect of like building your personal portfolio within a company, moves are, when you get pretty senior, are kind of rare, and so it's actually pretty hard for a lot of companies to find senior scientists. The other thing about consulting is that you don't really have a lot of time to develop new stuff unless you, like, as a company, make a big effort or start an initiative to do that. And so as a senior researcher, if you have a new cool thing that can be applied to a particular industry, you have all of the hard work that the consulting company doesn't. You've already done the hard work that the consulting company doesn't have time to do, right? New technology, new service, expanding X, Y, or Z for the firm. The thing that you would kind of have to start from scratch, it's like a little bit of an odd thing, because like there's some implied leveling and pay associated with the level of experience you have, but you really kind of have to start from scratch in terms of project management, which is a unique skill, building your network of clients and relationships with those folks, learning the like weird like nuts and bolts day-to-day kind of stuff that like all staff do at a company, or things like that. And so it's kind of a weird mix, but I think, like Sean was saying, if you can convince a firm that like the thing that you are the expert in can be a service that can enhance the work that the company already does, you're definitely in the door.
And I guess it looks like we had a question kind of building off of that, directed at you, Keely, but I'm sure other folks can jump in too. So let me see. It's kind of a long one. So how okay is the company / client with trying new methods, approaches, tools that have not been tried and tested? In academia, you're encouraged to do this to some degree, but in consulting, it often seems that they want you to do what drive lesser innovation. But this could vary depending on the company.
Yeah, it's really variable based on the company. And I really wanted to find a place where that is a priority. And so and I also wanted to live in the Bay Area for family reasons. So, my research into what companies I wanted to work for after graduating got me something like 3 companies. And balance, that's a priority for balance. I think it's something that we as a company build our reputation on. A lot of times we get work because some other firm is given something, they're like, this seems hard, we don't want to do that, and then they direct it to us and we do it. And that's the fun part. And that's, I think, what having a PhD or having the curiosity and drive to answer the unanswerable questions gets you at a firm like Balance. You don't necessarily have to have a PhD, but that kind of proves that in some ways it demonstrates that. And so I would say not everybody at the company answers those sorts of questions. I'm kind of one of the people at the company that does, and that's what I'm really excited about. Convincing, spending time to like work on new things, experimental things, it does happen, but it happens very slowly. You're like, let's try out this idea at this thing. Oh, it didn't really work. Like, we're not going to spend 2 more days to figure it out now. Like, we're going to do the thing that we know is going to work, move on. Then like maybe the next time it comes up, you like get a little bit further and you like try it a little bit more. And then it's like, oh, that sort of worked. Maybe we'll try it next time. And then eventually, you find enough, like you talk about it with enough people at professional conferences or lunches, or like it comes up enough. And then you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure we know how to do this. I need X, Y, and Z time, resources to do it. And then you get internal approval to like non-billable time to like go after it. Sometimes they're marketing event initiatives. Sometimes it's just let's see if we can do this. I'm working on a few projects like that right now, kind of leveraging some new like data analytics stuff, climate change data sets, things that I think have been really infiltrating into academia in the last few years since I got my PhD, unfortunately. So we're kind of pulling those into the work that we're doing now, and it's really, really exciting. We'll actually be hiring soon, so we'll probably send out a job posting to the Gilbert Club mailing list. So yeah, it depends on the company for sure.
I have just a few brief comments to add on to Keely's comments. First, if you think you're someone who's interested in trying to apply new methods that you've learned in school or that you learn otherwise in your professional career, it's important to make sure you pair up with an organization that shares your interests. And Keely talked about that. But there are some companies, organizations, their goal is to deliver a service, and they deliver it the same way, more or less, every time they do it. And there are good reasons for that. It reduces risk, makes it easier for them to forecast income, so forth. But other organizations want to be at the cutting edge, right? They want to be seen as someone who's pushing the field and the practice in new directions. So if you are someone who has interests there, then make sure you do your research on the organizations and the firms that you apply to work for. And then second, I just want to make a point that may not be obvious to people. Oftentimes you can find an opportunity to apply new approaches by building a strong relationship with the clients that you work with. And so if the clients gain trust in your technical abilities and how you use information to try to answer the questions that they put in front of you, you may find yourself in the position where your client says, yeah, I'm willing to pay you to test out a new idea, understanding that it may not come up with anything useful for me. So similar in academia, where you build research collaborations with your partners, and obviously you're trying new ideas and testing new theories and instruments perhaps and so forth, you can have a similar relationship with the clients that you work with. But that takes time to build, but it can happen. And that's often one of the most exciting ways to apply new skills or knowledge in the field of practice.
And yeah, if anyone had any other thoughts on that or just general advice that we're kind of getting down to the time now, a little past 9 o'clock. Any other thoughts? Good, Laura.
Yeah, I guess, again, this is kind of cheesy, but I felt like something I came up against a lot, especially in grad school and to some extent as a postdoc, was, maybe negativity or like a sense of defeat or something like that with leaving academia. And just want to say, like, as getting skills in science, you do have a lot of skills that you maybe don't realize you have. So you do get a lot of writing skills and a lot of critical thinking and communication skills. And I think it's okay to sort of, test those out and apply for jobs, even if you aren't sure you're qualified, but you can, like Sean was saying with the cover letter, really communicating in there, say like I know my background's a little unconventional maybe, but actually since I did, like organizing seminars, I have really good organizational skills, which I can apply to these jobs this way. So yeah, I think, don't be afraid to sell yourself. You have skills, I promise.
Yeah, I'll add to that. It's a good point, Laura, which is that I think, like I said before, when I started at Balance, I didn't really know how to do anything that they did already. And it can be, and to also build on what Sean was saying previously, it can be difficult from a company's website to figure out what it is that a company does. And I think that those regional professional conferences can be they're just so valuable for figuring that out, right? Attend conference talks that sound interesting by companies. You get a better sense of what it is that they're working on, what may or may not be interesting about it, and how you can apply the skills that you have to that. And as someone who's presented at conferences like that, I would love to talk to as many people about the work as are interested. And so if you have questions about it, like, oh, how did you do this? Or like, I'm working on this, like, is this applicable? Or, please come up and talk to us afterwards. And that's probably the single best way to figure out what the connection is there between the work and experience you have and how that can fit in with an existing company or job.
I just have one more tiny point. There's a slight difference between how we phrase things in academia and how I think a lot of other people outside of things think about how you achieve things. Ultimately, like a paper is, I've researched this, and it maybe means this. But a lot of other positions I've applied for are looking for you to define things as, I did X, it improved Y by Z%, and as a result, A. I think phrasing your achievements in this sort of task and the results of that task and what that means for the kind of bottom line is a better way in some ways of phrasing your results. If you can sort of rethink your approach to your research and how it's changed X, Y, or Z process, maybe a better way of defining what you've done as an academic for a kind of world outside of there as well. But I wish you all the best of luck as well, I think.
Cool. Well, I guess yeah. With that, yeah, let's thank our panelists so much. A little virtual round of applause for y'all for taking the time to sit with us and provide your insights here too. So this, of course, this is being live streamed too. So if folks weren't able to stick around, this will be posted on the EPSP Connect's website. And I wanted to thank all of you for all the audience members too, providing a few questions and also for attending as well. Yeah, with that, so just wanted to remind viewers, so we do have an exit survey too for the EPSP Connects seminar series. So if you could take the time, just a few minutes to fill out and provide some feedback, that'd be awesome. We're taking next month off too. So there won't be a July one, but then we'll pick up again in August with Marissa Pelusis, and she's going to be talking about some geomorphology on Mars, so exoplanetary outside Earth seminar there too. So thanks again, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.